on track, but maybe they're no. Welcome back to Buffalo's. Why do I say that every time? I think when we do this on Wednesdays, I'm so used to saying it on Wednesdays, but
Right.
welcome back to the Sports Lab podcast.
There we
Me
go.
and my friend Thomas Bailey, as we have a lot to get into. We have a fun episode here for you guys today. Is we're going to be debuting our midseason quarterback rankings. We did have a little bit of controversy as we were a little miscommunication. As Thomas at first thought we were doing it just in the 2024 season. I had it as just who you think are the best quarterbacks. So there is going to be a little bit of a battle there, but this is basically going to be is if you were starting a franchise, the quarterbacks you'd want in order from 1 to
Oh,
36.
okay. That's fair.
Well, yeah, who you think is the
Well,
best,
I
I
mean,
guess.
it's
Yeah.
just because we got a bunch of the rookies and stuff, so I figured we'd have to go off
Okay,
just
you're
this
right.
season. That's not
If
fair
for
for
this,
them
yes.
because they don't have any
Okay,
other years.
okay, yes. If you were starting a franchise for just this season alone, who you would
Okay.
want as your quarterback. If it was just one season, you needed 1 through 36, and it's not who we think it's not the 36 best. It's a QB ranking quiz that we did that just had 36 guys to choose from. So
Right.
there are guys towards the bottom of the list that I would rank lower, but there was no one else to rank them between, so they sit where they're at. But before we get into that, the NFL trade deadline just passed yesterday, and we're going to go over some of the notable trades. Obviously, there were trades that already had happened with the Amari Cooper, Devontae Adams, D-Hop deals, but there were some decent trades that happened on the deadline. The biggest one being Marshawn Lattimore got traded to the Commanders for a third that the Commanders got from the Jahan Dotson trade, a fourth and a sixth, and the Saints also give a fifth with Lattimore. Thomas, what are your thoughts on that deal?
I mean, I really like the deal for the Commanders. They had a ton of picks to work with in this upcoming draft, 11 before this trade. I mean, yes, you're getting rid of a third, a fourth, and a sixth, which seems like a lot, but for the player Marshawn Lattimore offers, this is putting your chips in the middle, which is what they need to do. They finally have a roster that can actually win football games, as shown by their record being 7-2. They've looked absolutely great to start the season. And this is an all-in kind of move, and I'm all for it right now. Jaden Daniels looks like a top 15 quarterback in the league, which obviously will rank these quarterbacks today. But, I mean, he's been a phenomenal start to his rookie season. And, I mean, if you look back to RG3's season, one thing the Commanders, I guess at the time, Redskins, really wished that they would have done was go all in and really invest into that season. And that's exactly what the Commanders decided to do this time. I really like the move. Also getting that 5th round pick back, you do get to keep another pick. And yes, you lost your 3rd and your 4th, but you still have 4 5th round picks now that you can use to trade up to the 4th round
They
twice if
still
you
have a
wanted to.
third.
Yeah, and they
That
still
third
have
that they
the
gave
other
up was from
third.
the Jahan Dotson trade, and Jahan
Right.
Dotson's been awful this year.
Exactly. So to be honest with you, they still have the other third. They can move back into the 4th round if that's really what they so choose. Even if they take 2 of those fifths, move up to the 4th, they still have 2 more fifths. So they really have a ton of flexibility in order to just do whatever they want in this upcoming draft. It's not really tanking their future for a win now move necessarily. It's an all around great move by the Commanders front office, which is something that's really weird to say considering how the Commanders have been these last few seasons. But I mean, I like the trajectory for Washington. They get a very good cornerback in Marshawn Lattimore, which in my opinion is a top 3 need on the Commanders right now. It's right there with the interior O-line as well. But I do think that this is a team right now that really needed corner, and they got their guy in Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You obviously brought up what you like on the Commander side, so I'm going to bring up the Saints side of this thing. I actually do love this move for the Saints. I think they need to just blow it
I
up.
think this is a win-win.
Yeah, I think the Saints being able to get a third, a fourth, and a sixth to get off that salary because they're in cap hell and they need to start making moves to get themselves out of the cap instead of what they've done for the last 4 years, just pushing
Just
the money
push it
down the
back.
road.
Yeah.
They need to just get it off the books because they're not going to be competitive for years. And I think they're starting to realize that. Obviously, you just extended Kamara. No one's going to trade for an aging running back on that contract. You're going to keep him. Chris Olave, I understand he's concussion concerns. You probably want to keep him for when you eventually draft a quarterback. You want to give him someone to throw to. But like Taysom Hill, you're probably going to want to move off him in the offseason. I doubt they will because the Saints have a hard on for him. Ryan Ramczyk, you're going to want to try and get off of Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu. Like there's just these guys, Demario Davis, these aging vets that have all this cap space. You're just going to trade at this point for pennies on the dollar, start over, tank this year. I don't think necessarily if I was them, what I would do personally is when if they're going to end up with a top pick, I would not draft a quarterback now. I would trade back, get more picks, just picks, get as many picks as possible. Just start drafting people and see what sticks. Just the more picks you have, it's kind of like the Bill Belichick when he was the Patriots GM, is he just wanted as many picks as possible. And it's even two for 8 versus 1 for 4. It's the same percentage, but I'd rather go 2 for 8 than draft than 1 for 4 because you hit on 2 guys. And that's what the Belichick strategy was, is he just wanted so many picks. If you just hit on 1 or 2 of them every draft, it's worth it. I think that could work for the Saints if they can just get a lot of picks, get out of cap space, then start to build it up. And then next year is when they probably are still going to be awful. They go and get the quarterback. So I think this is the perfect move to start the rebuild. And on the Commander side, perfect fit. This is basically about as perfect as a fit as the Bills trading for Amari Cooper. Is they're an all-in team that want to go make a run, and they have the pieces to do it, but they had a big need at a premium position, and they went and got a premium guy at not that expensive of a cost. Yes, a third, a fourth, and a sixth is decent draft capital, but the third was from a Jahan Dotson deal, and then it was basically Jahan Dotson, a fourth, and a sixth for Lattimore, and a fifth, which, look at it, it's for someone of Lattimore's ability is not that much. So I think great work by the Commanders. As you said, very shocking that the Commanders are actually making smart moves as opposed to years past when they were pathetic.
Yes, indeed.
Moving on, that was not the only trade of the day. The Steelers made 2 moves as they gave up a 5th for Mike Williams from the Jets, and they gave up a 7th to get Preston Smith from the Packers. Thomas, what are your thoughts on these moves?
I mean, I really like the Preston Smith move. I mean, you're making something even better than it already has been. And if you know the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I'm sure everyone in the NFL that is into NFL football knows, this defense for so many years now just could not stay healthy. This is the healthiest they've been, yes, but it's just inevitable for the Pittsburgh Steelers to finally have an injury. Preston Smith is the ultimate depth piece. And you give up what? 2025 7th? Are you kidding me? That's absolutely amazing value for them. He's on the final year of his deal. If you don't want to re-sign him, you just send him to free agency on his happy way. And exactly the move that Preston Smith needs as a player as well. He wasn't getting the playing time he wanted. He wasn't fitting the scheme. He goes into a scheme he fits in much better, and he gets to potentially raise his stock for this upcoming free agency where he'll be chasing what is sure to be one of his final contracts. Considering he's 30, 31 years old, this is his chance to show what he can do in a Pittsburgh defense that's looked very good so far this season. And he's the ultimate depth piece just in case somebody goes down. Great move on both sides there. As for the Mike Williams deal, you've needed a number 1 receiver other than George Pickens. You need somebody else to throw the ball to. Well, Calvin Austin has been a decent surprise for them. He's just inconsistent, can't keep the ball in his hand sometimes. And I feel like Mike Williams is that sure-handed guy on the opposite side. You got 2 big body receivers now, and he embodies what Pittsburgh is. It's just a tough, gritty football team that Mike Tomlin loves to coach. And this is exactly what he wants to bring in, is those physical receivers. He's got one on George Pickens already. He goes out and gets Mike Williams in this one. Very good moves by the Pittsburgh Steelers at the deadline, showing that they're right there with the rest of the AFC contenders. And they're saying, hey, you guys are out there making moves. Bills, you traded for Amari Cooper. Let's go get Mike Williams. Bring in a number 2 for us as well. We'll get us a number receiver. You Chiefs made a move for Hopkins. Let's go get Williams. Let's pull the chips, push them into the middle of the table, and go all in for one potential ride for Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I agree. I really do like these moves. I think Preston Smith still's got some juice left in the tank. He's not going to start, but he'll be a rotational piece. And then if Highsmith or TJ Watt go down, you could bring someone like him in, where obviously they're not that caliber of player, but they can at least be decent, where it's not just an insane drop off that kills the defense.
Exactly.
And to only give up a 7.
Average.
Exactly. And on Green Bay side of things, they weren't really playing him. They already had guys. Instead, now a 7th isn't much, but they got something, and they got rid of that contract, which now that they can afford to sign some of their young guys who are moving up, some of these extensions are coming up soon. They couldn't really afford to pay someone like Preston Smith the $10 million that they were. So I like it for both sides. Same thing with the Jets and the Steelers trade. Mike Williams wasn't really playing much. You already have Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. He's a free agent after this year. Your chances of making the playoffs aren't that high anyways. So you might as well just get what you can out of him. And to be able to get a 5th, that's decent value for him. And then the Steelers, again, they got a good depth pass rusher who can be a great backup, an above average player, and then a receiver to complement George Pickens so they don't put so much attention on him. And you only gave up day 3 picks. So like, I think great job by both sides to be able to get value and get out of these, make the moves that were necessary. I think overall there wasn't really many boneheaded moves of this trade deadline for either side, except for the one I'm going to get into, which is the Cowboys giving up a 4th round pick for Jonathan Mingo and a 7th. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I really want to touch on the Packers side of things for that Preston Smith deal. When he got traded, I instantly thought they were going to go out and get somebody. I'm very confused why they would give him up. He's in the final year of his deal. I mean, yeah, you have $10 million for this season, but if you're not going to trade somebody,
was I looking at someone else? Maybe it was Zadarius Smith I was looking at. It might have been his. I was looking at a contract, and he had a couple years left, and it was like $8 million next year, then like $16 million the year after that. I thought it was for Preston. It might have been for Zadarius. That could be my bad.
I think it might be for Zadarius, because for Preston, I don't think the Steelers would have pulled that trigger, considering realistically he's not going to start, like you said, and paying somebody or even $16 million after that.
No, I did think it was. I do think it was Preston, because I remember someone that was reacting to it said that like Pittsburgh can afford that because it's not like they're going to have to be paying a quarterback anytime soon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Even still, though, for Green Bay, I understand you get out of that move there, but what's the reason behind getting out of the move if you weren't going to go and get somebody right now? You could have shipped him off in the offseason for maybe even more, considering that's when normally teams just need a little bit more teams. There would be more teams in the running, is what I'm saying, in the offseason as compared to right now. And also, I feel like to maximize that pick, if you're going to go for a 7th round pick or something like that, just get 6 or 7 teams in there, and then the draft order is finalized by the offseason. You just pick whichever team has the best pick at that spot. I mean, you don't think Pittsburgh's going to have a super high pick, but at the same time, they're not probably going to be like 32 or 30 range. So who really knows? But back to this topic for Jonathan Mingo, I don't know what the Cowboys are doing. This is the most desperate move I've ever seen Jerry Jones make. I feel this is just a pathetic Cowboys team right now, trying to go all in for what is now the Cooper Rush-led offense, or maybe Trey Lance. I'm not sure. I mean, realistically, yeah, but at the same time, this is absolutely awful for the Cowboys. I feel bad for these fans that have longed for this. Obviously, I understand. No, I feel bad at the fact that I don't feel
bad for Cowboys fans at all.
No, I only feel bad for the simple fact that, like, you know, they were supposed to go all in this offseason. They didn't, and now their all-in move is trading for a second-year wide receiver who was 5th on the Panthers depth chart. The Panthers depth chart, who are the worst team in football, mind you. Maybe not. The Saints are kind of showing why they could be as well. So, but either way, I do think that this is an interesting move for the Carolina Panthers. I really like it. Obviously, getting a 4th-round pick, high value on a guy that you probably weren't ever going to use. And on top of that, for the Cowboys, I don't see the value in this. I understand you get a pick back as well. I think it was a 6th round pick, but at the same time, 7th round pick, even worse. So the fact that you're moving down 3 spots for Jonathan Mingo is just absolutely annoying and confusing for these Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I agree. I would understand if they gave up a 6th and then got the 7th back, because it's like you're just taking a flyer on a guy. You got a couple years left. So let's see what you have in him. Like, he still has, like, yeah, he hasn't produced and he's not good right now. He is bad. I'm not saying he's not, but he is still uber athletic and still has some potential. So I understand why you, like, if you gave up like a 6th for a 7th swap, like, makes sense. You're not really giving up a lot there, and you're taking a flyer on someone you desperately need receiver help, and you let him play out this year while you guys aren't that good. You give him some reps, you see what you have in him, and the next year maybe you can build the offense to try and manufacture him some touches, and he can develop a relationship with Dak Prescott. But to give up a 4th is just absurd. You can still draft some really good players in the 4th round. A 4th round pick still got some decent value, and to get someone like Mingo is just laughable. The Cowboys, if you really wanted a receiver and if you're willing to give up a 4th, why wouldn't you go get D-Hop or Deontay Johnson? Both way better and cheaper. Like, the Panthers got more for Jonathan Mingo than they did Deontay Johnson. Absolutely absurd. Great work by the Panthers. I mean, realizing that the Cowboys were giving up, like, they're not starting Mingo and they were getting a 4th round pick out of him. Great work by the Panthers there. Probably the first good move they've made in 10 years, but congratulations to them for fleecing the Cowboys. I saw someone make the meme that the Cowboys are like that like that fantasy football manager that you can fleece every year. So you just send him a bunch of BS trades and see which one he accepts.
Yeah,
Kind of makes sense. Cowboys, other than drafting Jerry Jones these last probably 5 to 7 years, has been one of the worst GMs I've ever seen. He's drafted well. I mean, the Dak Prescott pick, Micah
Parsons. I thought you were going to
Parsons.
say something way different because you said other than drafting Jerry Jones, and I was just like, what?
Oh, yeah, no, because he is I'll give him credit. He has drafted a lot of talent. He's just mismanaged the shit out of it with bad coaching, hiring, and just
I do think
bad
McCarthy
personnel management and free agency. Yeah, Mike McCarthy has got to go. He was
not
a bad hire when I thought it was.
Prescott got hurt. They're going to say that the season was lost because Prescott's injury, and all will be well in Big D.
Also, it shows how much Dan Quinn really meant to that defense. They just didn't have the personnel, and he got the most out of it because that defense was good.
Dan Quinn when he got hired from Washington.
Yeah, I am sorry, Dan Quinn. I disrespected you and I was low on you. My apologies. You are a good coach. The Cowboys just had me brainwashed that it was on you, not the players. But you have proven me wrong. I have my apologies for you.
Exactly.
Moving on to the final trade, I want to talk about the Za'Darius Smith trade. The Lions finally get a pass rusher to replace Aiden Hutchinson for the season, as they gave up a 2025 fifth and a 2026 sixth, and they got Za'Darius Smith and a 2026 seventh. What are your thoughts on this deal?
Really like it for the Detroit Lions. They did a lot right at this deadline. I think that there were a lot of talks where they could go out and do more things, but I really think that this is the one move they absolutely had to do. It's been in the works for a couple of days leading up to the eventual trade being announced publicly, but I do think that Za'Darius Smith is a hell of a pass rusher, and he's going to fit just fine in that Lions defense. They are absolutely tearing teams apart right now. He's going to click right into the spot where Aiden Hutchinson left off. And I think he's not going to be some all-world talent or anything crazy like that, but I do think he can get you 5 or 6 sacks for the rest of the way. And I'm including playoffs at least for this, but I do think that he's a solid guy. He's going to get you some veteran presence in that locker room, and on top of that, he can offer you some very good pressure on top of the sacks that he's going to get. The one thing that he's been a little iffy in is the run-stopping department, but nobody really runs to that outside against the Lions. They have two of the best linebackers in the league right now with Anzalone playing elite. And then even Malcolm Rodriguez has kind of flown under the radar for them as well. So very good move for the Detroit Lions. Gets that defense even better than what it already was. I understand you lose Hutchinson, but it's addition here, at least for right now. And if you want to keep Za'Darius Smith long-term, you definitely can go back and do that in the offseason. You still need somebody for that right side, in my opinion. You still really do need somebody. I don't think Romeo or Julian Aguilar is going to fit that mold. And on top of that, Hutchinson comes back. You keep Smith. Look out for these Detroit Lions. And what do you give up? Really nothing in this trade. You get the 7th-round pick back even. Honestly, it seemed like, it's not enough for only these 2 picks. It's still getting the 7th back. Very savvy move by Holmes, and I really do like what the Lions are building right now. They've looked absolutely phenomenal, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think the Lions absolutely killed it with this trade for what you mentioned. They just need some sort of pass rush juice. Obviously, their run defense is really good, and their offense is really good. When you have that duo, what teams are going to be doing is they're going to be throwing the ball on you, and your safety duo is really good. The weaknesses of the Detroit Lions after Hutch went down is their corners could be beat sometimes against good receivers, good quarterbacks. They can kind of have their way, but the way you counteract that is with a good pass rush. They had that with Aiden Hutchinson. Then they kind of lost that when he went down. You saw against the Vikings, they were able to put up almost 30 points on them with Sam Darnold throwing to Justin Jefferson. But now you add someone like Za'Darius Smith. Obviously, he's not going to be able to replace Hutchinson, but now he can add at least some sort of juice there where it helps their pass rush out a little bit more. So when Detroit has this lead, the teams get in these passing situations. Now you have someone who you can trust to go and get that sack in the 4th quarter on 3rd down to help win you a playoff game. That's kind of what this move is for. And then on the Cleveland side of things, I get it. This is a lost season. He's an older, aging veteran. But to only get up a 5th, him. Yeah, exactly. You probably weren't going to re-sign him. But to only get a 5th and a 6th, I feel like only getting a 5th and a 6th is a little underwhelming for how good he has been over the last 3-4 years. I feel like you probably should have tried to get a little bit more, but I obviously, if you could have got more, you would have. So this was probably the best deal you had, so you took it. So I get it, but at the end of the day, the Lions definitely won this trade because they got a really good player at a great value. But at least the Browns were able to get something. They got a 5th and a 6th. And for someone who was going to walk at the end of the season on a team that was not going to make the playoffs, so there was no reason to keep him. So I get it. At the end of the day, that's kind of how a lot of NFL trade deadlines are. Teams that are selling never really get adequate value for the players because it's like
at the same time,
they're just trying to get something.
I think that's more on Holmes here. He didn't overpay. He knew that no other team was going to go out there and offer them anything more. And he said, listen, we'll give you a 5th and a 6th. And if you don't take that, he's just going to stay on your team and leave in free agency for nothing. So just give him to us.
Yeah,
Very smart move, especially by a team.
I completely agree.
The team that it's not like they're a fringe playoff team like Pittsburgh or something where, they have to overpay in order to, get this guy because they really need him. The Lions are going to be right there in the thick of things for the rest of the season and even in the playoffs. That could very well be the last pick of the 5th and 6th rounds potentially based off how the Lions have played. So realistically, for Holmes to know his boundaries, to cut it off at the 5th and 6th, very smart GMing by him.
Oh yeah, my opinion, he is the best GM in the league.
He's right there, man.
I think he's number 1, and Howie Roseman's number 2, and then I think there's somewhat of a drop, if I'm being honest.
I think if you're talking just draft, Brett Veach is so close. If he just
my thing with Brett Veach is I don't think he's a great GM. I think he has great coaching that makes his players look better. I genuinely believe
that. I can agree with. But
I think it's more
argue against the 7th round pick of Isaiah Pacheco.
He is. I'm not saying he is a bad drafter.
Smith in the 6th.
I'm not saying he's a bad drafter. I just think that I would just give more of the credit to the coaching staff than him. Right. But just because you've seen
players they get in the late rounds,
you've seen these players leave his system. You've seen these players leave the system and be bad, which shows that maybe they weren't the greatest player. They just got coached up to be amazing, which I will give Brett Veach credit on drafting players that fit the system. I'm just going to give more credit to Steve Spagnuolo being arguably the best defensive coordinator in football, and Andy Reid being arguably the best offensive mind in football, and Pat Mahomes being unarguably the best quarterback in football. Spoiler to our list, but Pat Mahomes is the number 1 quarterback in football. It's a spoiler, but anyone with a brain that shouldn't really spoil you, unless you're just a retarded Ravens fan, because there's plenty of them out there that think Lamar's won. But no, Pat Mahomes is better.
Right.
But that's actually a good segue. As we're done talking about the trade deadline, now it's time to get into our QB ranking. So how we're going to do this is we're going to go based on sets of 5, and we're going to debate. Then we're going to move on. We're going to start from the bottom tier up to the top. The first tier is going to be 6 guys just because there's 36 on this instead of 35. So it's going to be 36 through 31, 26 through 30, 21 through 25, etc. So I will go first. I will go 30. I will name it 31 through 36. Or actually, no, I'll just do 36 by 31. So at 36, I have Diddy Watson. 35, I have JJ McCarthy. 34, I have Bryce Young. 33, I have Will Levis. 32, I have Jacoby Brissett. And 31, I have Bo Nix. I guess I'll give my quick reasonings, then I'll let you go give your quick reasonings, then we'll debate. Deshaun Watson's just god-awful. There's no debate there. If I could rank him lower, I would. JJ McCarthy, he just hasn't played yet, so I can't rank him any higher. Like, that's nothing towards him. Just haven't seen him. It's not really fair to put him higher. Bryce Young, I mean, he played decent these last 2 weeks compared to how he had been, but those first 2 weeks were so bad. He is just too small and not athletic enough to make up for it. He is inconsistent accuracy because his footwork's so bad because of his size. Will Levis, he's been awful this year. I expected him to take a step. He just hasn't been able to put it together. He's got all the tools, just can't put it together. Jacoby Brissett is the definition of a backup. He can come in and play decent. He can dink and dunk your way down the field, but he has no resemblance of a deep ball, which absolutely kills your offense over the span of more than like 1 or 2 games. As you see, he can come in last year in Washington. He came in when Sam Howell was benched and played good for a couple weeks. He came in when Drake May got injured and played good and led that win. He can do that. He can dink and dunk his way down the field as a backup. He's a good backup, but he's nothing more than that. And then Bo Nix at 31, I just think he is overrated right now because that Denver defense is so good. They've played a bunch of shitty teams. That record is overinflated. I think he is just a bad quarterback. He doesn't push the ball down the field. He's extremely inaccurate. He's not good over the middle of the field. He doesn't offer much other than he can run. That's really the only plus he has going right now. So that's why I guess I'd put him over the guys below him, is because at least he can do that. Let you have the floor.
All right, I agree with 36 being Deshaun Watson. He's just absolutely awful. He turned what would be a contending Cleveland Browns team into a cellar dweller for this entire season. He absolutely fleeced them of one of the worst contracts I've ever seen in my life.
I say the
worst as of this moment in time. 35, I have Bryce Young. There's just not much you have with him right now. He's not been looking the greatest. They benched him for a reason for Andy Dalton, which, speaking of Andy Dalton, he is my number 34 quarterback. I think he's a solid backup, but nothing more, just like Brissett. I do think that Andy Dalton is a little bit worse than Brissett, only for the simple fact you don't see Dalton come in and play good like ever. Yes, he had a good game last year for the Panthers, and then this year he had that one good game as well against the Raiders. But I don't think he's all that great. 34 is a solid place for him. 33, I have Joe Flacco. We just haven't seen too much of him. And in the game he played against the Vikings last week, he was absolutely god-awful. The only guy he could find was Josh Downs, who was 3 yards downfield. So check down Flacco strikes again. I do think he's a solid quarterback, definitely capable of doing things in this league. But, I mean, we've seen it for years to come. But I do think that this is the year where you have to be able to do something with this Colts team that is definitely in contention for a wild card right now with how the race is shaping up. So I do think that they need a little more from him. So I'll put him at 33. 32, I have Bo Nix. I just don't really see the value in Bo Nix right now. He hasn't been able to do too much that you ask of a quarterback. The one thing he has been able to do, however, is he has been able to actually give you some moments where he's flashed with these runs, or a couple throws where he's made some really nice throws on the run. But, I mean, he's a rookie. He's going to develop eventually. Sean Payton is a great offensive mind, so we'll see what he becomes later on. But for right now, he is in the lower echelon of quarterbacks. And then my number 31 is Gardner Minshew. I do think Gardner Minshew is a decent quarterback. I don't think he's the best in the world. I don't think he's really all that bad. But at the same time, you got to do a little bit more with this Raiders team that's at least decent. You have Brock Bowers, who you picked in the first round. You had Devontae Adams to start the year. You had Jacoby Myers to start the year. Even Trey Tucker's had a solid season. But realistically, Gardner Minshew couldn't really get much going with this team, and that's unfortunate for him. But he's going to round out my top 6 in the lowest quarterbacks.
Bottom 6.
Bottom 6, but I'm saying
disclaimer. Thomas told me before the podcast he is just pretending JJ McCarthy is Drake May, so
yes, because Drake May is not on this list for some reason, and JJ McCarthy.
It was probably made. It probably hasn't been updated in a couple weeks, would be my guess. I guess my only thing is you didn't have Jacoby Brissett in that, did you? I don't remember hearing his name.
I did not. He is actually, spoiler alert, he's my number 30.
I just think he is worse than those backups that you mentioned prior to him, just because at least those backups can push the ball down the field semi. I just feel like Jacoby Brissett has no ability to push the ball down the field, that it really kills his offense. And then I also think not having Will Levis in this bottom tier, I mean, they gave him weapons this year, and he basically got replaced. I understand he's injured, but he basically got replaced by Mason Rudolph. He was pretty god-awful, and Mason Rudolph came in, who I also think sucks and has played better than him. So I understand the flashes he's shown, but I think you're just a little high on those two guys that I wouldn't be, but no, it's Brissett, about the same.
I'm only going to say for Brissett, you said that this is more so of like an all-time thing, not all-time crazy, but still, if you look at just Jacoby Brissett, he's made it work with the Colts. He's made it work with the Patriots twice now. He's been able to come in for multiple different teams and play, and that's why I have him over a guy like Andy Dalton, who played like crap for the Bears, really didn't look that great the back end of his career with Cincinnati. Yes, he's had a couple good games with the Panthers, but he hasn't been able to have that longevity, and I understand neither has Brissett, but at the same time, if Brissett can go out there and get you just a solid game, he can rely on that defense to do a lot. And as for Andy Dalton, I do really like Dalton, Red Rifle. He was great in Cincinnati at the beginning, but I mean, look at his stint with like the Saints, that pick six he had against Budda Baker that everyone thinks about. I mean, he just hasn't had these great runs with these other kinds of teams like Brissett did. And as for Will Levis, he's a very young quarterback. I view him in a very similar fashion to Anthony Richardson, who we'll get to eventually. But I think that Anthony Richardson has a lot better of tools than Will Levis does, but at the same time, they're almost cut from the same cloth. I do think that these are two guys that are coming from the smaller end of the SEC schools, Florida and Kentucky. They're
I
both
wouldn't say
solid.
Florida's a smaller, but I get what you're saying.
Like as of when they came out, they weren't the greatest teams in college.
Okay, yeah, that's
And
fair.
then
That's fair. That's
Richardson and Levis are both those running style quarterbacks that can throw on the run. They're going to be able to be aggressive and throw the ball downfield. Will Levis and Richardson both have cannons for arms. I do really like these quarterbacks, but at the same time, it's just they both got benched. I mean, they're two guys that I feel like can turn it around. And if I had to believe in one or the other, it's going to be Richardson, yes. But at the same time, I do think Levis will turn it around and get a solid thing going. It's just you got to have that belief from the coaching staff. And right now, his confidence is at an all-time low, I feel, for him. So I do think he's still a solid quarterback. I definitely can't rank him lower than a guy like Joe Flacco, who's played one game and looked awful. Andy Dalton, who really hasn't done anything. Bryce Young, who got benched in week 2, who's another young quarterback that got benched. Deshaun Watson, Bo Nix, who's only been able to run the ball, barely throwing the ball at all, and then Gardner Minshew, who is the only one you can really consider here.
Yeah, I guess my thing, as you said, all right, so we're bringing like how some of these quarterbacks have had success on other teams, but like Joe Flacco was a big portion of why the Browns made the playoffs last year.
Oh yeah, that's
Gardner
why he's
Minshew,
higher than Dalton. That's why he's higher than Dalton. Literally.
but like I just feel like Brissett in that situation wouldn't have been able to do that. And Gardner Minshew almost led the Colts to the playoffs last year. I feel like Brissett wouldn't have been able to do that.
Though, if you look at where Flacco was, Flacco kind of got like most of the work had already been done for the Browns. He only had to put away a couple games near the end of the season. And I do think that Brissett could have probably got them those couple wins. I feel like Flacco and Brissett are almost in the same, like cut from the same cloth, where there's quarterbacks that really dink and dunk their way down the field. They're good for a couple games, rely on those defenses to really win them those games.
Flacco's more of a gunslinger.
No, Flacco
not much this last game, but I think the reason why he worked on the Browns is because he was just willing to chuck it down the field. I just don't think Jacoby Brissett has that ability. I guess that's my difference is Joe Flacco's willingness to push the ball down the field versus Jacoby's non-willingness or inability to. I mean, at the same time, they're all in the same area. Some of these quarterbacks that you named, I have coming up quite soon. So it's not like we're much difference. We're kind of just splitting hairs at this point.
Yeah, right.
All right, moving on. My 30 through 26, I have Joe Flacco at 30, Andy Dalton at 29, Gardner Minshew at 28, Daniel Jones at 27, and Derek Carr at 26. All these guys, they're basically they're just basically little bit better versions of the guys I named earlier. I still not have much confidence in these guys at all. They're all basically backups or tried to be starters that just keep failing. Yeah, I mean, I probably before the season, I think I would have had Gardner Minshew a little bit higher, but it was kind of a disaster for the Raiders this year. Despite having some decent pieces to work with, I thought it would have worked out a little bit better. It did not. Andy Dalton, yeah, I mean, he's there good for a couple games or two. He's a decent backup. Joe Flacco, same thing. Daniel Jones, he's shown his flashes. He can run the ball. He can sling it when wanted to, but get a little bit of pressure on him, and he is just disgustingly bad. He's extremely inaccurate, and he just has awful decision making when he is under pressure, and that's ultimately what costs him year in and year out. He hasn't had much to work with, like ever, so I'll cut him. He'll have one good skill position player at a time. He had Saquon, but no offensive line and no receivers. And then they get rid of Saquon, and he gets Malik Neighbors, but still not really much of an offensive line due to injuries. No receivers other than him. Not great running back play. Tyrone Tracy, maybe, but not yet. And then Derek Carr, same thing. He can show some flashes. He started the year on fire, but then it all fell apart. I will cut him some slack that basically everyone on the Saints is injured and he's playing with the practice squad. I will give him a little bit of slack there, but he is so bad under pressure, and that's what absolutely kills him. I don't think he's a good quarterback, but compared to a lot of these other guys, at least I've seen him succeed more. And like more recently, I've seen him at least do it semi. Like I've seen him be a consistent starter year in and year out, even if it's not a great one. It's better than all the guys that blow him. So that's kind of why I have him there.
Yeah, my 30 through 26 starts with Jacoby Brissett at 30. I do not think he's a great quarterback. He's right there at the bottom echelon of these guys. I do think that he's a little bit better than Minshew. I really debated on this one for a little bit between Brissett and Minshew on the ranking list, especially the second time through. But I ended up leaning with Jacoby Brissett. We've just seen him do more with these teams than we see Gardner Minshew do. Yeah, I mean, realistically, he hasn't had a good year with any team other than the Colts last year. I mean, he was terrible for the Jaguars in his rookie season. Although I don't blame that on him. The Jags back then were absolutely a dumpster fire, including the Urban Meyer stretch and stuff. But I do think that he is still a lower tier quarterback. Number 29, I have Will Levis. Will Levis is just not been the greatest quarterback to start the year. Again, that splitting hairs thing I really think comes true for this one. I think he's not a great quarterback. He's not a bad quarterback. For similar reasons to Bo Nix, though, he's just not been able to really prove what he can do yet. He's not showing that these guys are a savvy team for going up and getting him. And I don't think that the Tennessee Titans are all that happy with him right now. Obviously, I feel like he's been benched for Mason Rudolph. I don't think he's having a great sophomore season like everyone thought he could. But I do think he's still a solid guy who could potentially develop. Next up at 28, I have Daniel Jones. I don't think he's a great quarterback either. I think he's just done a little bit more than Will Levis has. You know, he obviously led him to the playoffs in 2022, albeit a contract year. So a little incentive there for him to actually play good. But I still do think that he had a solid season. We haven't seen Will Levis do that yet. And I have to lean with Daniel Jones in that argument. I still think he sucks, though. Not been able to really put anything together, and I don't think he will. But number 27, I have Derek Carr. He looked great to start the season, but again, under the pressure, he's been absolutely god-awful. And at first, there was a little bit of hope that the Saints would actually be a solid football team this year, and he completely shut down any hope of that. And I understand a lot of these guys are injured, but Chris Olave is literally injured because of him.
His hospital balls. He's literally
yeah, literally.
If Chris Olave, when he gets CTE, should sue Derek Carr because Derek Carr is the reason he's 3 straight hospital balls this season.
You need Derek Carr insurance at this point, but
yeah, and same as Spencer Rattler. The two of them should have to pay for Chris Olave's medical bills the way they've gotten him murdered.
Yes, literally. But I do think Derek Carr is still a solid guy. Again, back to that Daniel Jones thing. We've seen him do a little bit more than these other guys. He's done a little bit more than Daniel Jones, as Daniel Jones did a little bit more than Will Levis. So you see that trend there. Those guys are all in the same tier. It's just which one's done a little more. But next up at 26, I guess that point gets thrown out the window because this is where I have J.J. McCarthy's doppelganger in this situation, Drake May. I do think Drake May is a solid quarterback, and he will be a good quarterback in the future as well. It's just he's not got a lot to work with right now. He's working with Boutte, who was like a 6th-round pick last year for them. Really no good receiving options, not a great tight end room with Hunter Henry being the only realistic option. The offensive line has been absolutely garbage this season, and the defense has gotten worse ever since like week 5. So realistically, maybe even before that, but I still do think that this is a good room for Drake May. I think he's going to be, pardon, I do think he'll be a good quarterback. But for right now, we haven't seen too much. We've seen some flashes from him. I'm interested to see how he develops. But in terms of him or Will Levis, he's done a lot more with what he's gotten so far than Will Levis has done. So go ahead and give me Drake May at number 26 to round out my lower echelon as well.
Honestly, there's not much to debate there because literally, like, our 26 through 36 have the exact same people.
Yep.
There's not a single, and we already debated, like, earlier why we think different people should be changed. So honestly, there's not much debate there. And I kind of agree. I think that'd be a pretty good spot to put a Drake May. He's better than all of these guys, I think, right now. And I'll say it right now. I think at this point next year, that we'll be saying he's a top 10 quarterback after they get him a legit offensive tackle. And I think they'll get him a legit wide receiver. And maybe
this is also a pretty good guard class too. So if they go out and get like a guard in the 2nd or 3rd round, I'd be there.
Yeah. If they get, say, the 1st pick or 2nd pick, then they trade back, get a receiver, maybe pick up another 2nd, and then go like wide receiver.
Pull a Chicago, trade back and get your offensive lineman.
Yeah, exactly. Get a tackle, get a Calvin Banks, a Will Campbell, or maybe some other guys that might be.
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's different things you can do. Or maybe in free agency, there's good receivers in free agency. You can maybe draft a
There's going
guy,
to be a
sign a
ton.
guy.
Chris
You have
Godwin would be
so much.
amazing for them.
Yeah, if they have so much money, they have like 120 mil. You just put resources in where they can maybe go from having the worst offensive line to just below average and having the worst wide receiving core to just below average. And I think with him taking another step, I legitimately think he could be a top 10 quarterback next year if they play this offseason correctly. But I think right now, just because he hasn't played a lot and due to his team around him being god awful, he hasn't shown a lot. I think that's a good spot to put him. Moving on, since there really isn't much to debate there, we basically had the same guys. At 25, I have Anthony Richardson. 24, I have Justin Fields. 23, I have Russell Wilson. 22, I have Caleb Williams. And 21, I have Sam Darnold. Anthony Richardson, I still think there's a lot of hype around him. I'm excited to see if he continues to grow. I think he's still got a lot of potential. The issue, he just hasn't put it all together. He obviously an elite runner. He's elite deep ball. He just needs to learn. Maybe it's just the shoulder injury. He's not completely healthy from that shoulder injury last year, which maybe he needs to finish out the season and have a full off season of getting back in the swing of things. And next year he'll be a lot better. But he just hasn't been able to hit the short balls. But he also really hasn't looked to. He just looks to throw it deep and make the big play every single play. So I think that's where coaching needs to keep hammering it away. I mean, if you look at stats, it's similar to like Josh Allen through his first 10 career starts. There's similar numbers and similar players. So I don't think give up on him yet. I think you definitely play out next season. And then if he doesn't show anything next season, then it's like, all right, we need to cut ties. But I think you definitely give him another season. Justin Fields, I think he's a decent fit for Pittsburgh. He played well. He can run the ball. He can a good deep ball, but again, he's kind of like Anthony Richardson. He's not great at the underneath. He's not great at being consistently moving the chains. He can make some big plays and be electric, but him not being able to consistently move the chains, I can't really put him much higher. And then Russell Wilson's kind of like the opposite at this point. He's not that mobile anymore, but what he can do is he can consistently move the chains, and it counteracts really well with that defense. Is he's able to continue to move the chains. He's able to continue to put pressure on the opposing offenses by him getting at least in field goal range and scoring points, letting his defense play a little more because they know they trust him to be able to get points. They can play a little more aggressive. And then Caleb Williams at 22, I think he'll be a lot higher eventually. I'll just put him here just because we haven't seen a lot. I don't know how much you can really blame him because the offensive line's been awful. The play calling's been god awful. The receivers have basically stopped trying. Like legit, DJ Moore just has given up. He's like, I don't know if he's mad at Caleb Williams. He's mad at the play calling, mad at everything, but he's just stopped playing. He just half-asses his routes. Keenan Allen is washed. And then Remo Odunze has shown flashes, but he's still a rookie. And again, this offensive line is awful. Like this receiving core that's supposed to be really good has been extremely underwhelming. And that was supposed to be the saving grace that made up for the bad offensive line. So he has kind of been hung out to dry his rookie year, which a lot of people did not expect. So I'll cut him some slack, but I can't really put him much higher just because he's a rookie and he still hasn't put it together all yet and shown too much yet, even though I'm still very hopeful. And then Sam Darnold is kind of the opposite. He has shown a lot and been amazing this year, but he hadn't been in years past. And it makes me wonder, how much is it him? How much is it Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson? Like he has the top 5 offensive mind in the game, and he has the best, most valuable non-quarterback in the game, in my opinion. I think Justin Jefferson by far and away the best receiver in the game, and I think he is the most valuable non-quarterback in the league. Aaron Jones still has a lot of juice. Jordan Addison's still good. Like he's got a lot of playmakers with him with an elite offensive line or mind. I think it's making his job a lot easier, and he's doing a great job. All the credit to him. Before the season, I probably would have put him in the 31 to 36 range with how bad he'd been. Like he's really shown me a lot. But just because this is his first year of really doing anything, I can't put him any higher than 21.
Yeah, so I feel like we're going to have a little bit of controversy here. But number 25, I have Justin Fields. 24, I have AR. 23 is Russell Wilson. 22, Caleb Williams. 21, Trevor Lawrence. And I think that's where I stop, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I'll let you go first. Yep.
So I really like Justin Fields and Anthony Richardson. They're really, really similar in a lot of aspects for me. And I really do think that what it came down to was Anthony Richardson's just a little younger. He has a little bit more of that upside. You know, he still has a higher floor, I feel like, than Justin Fields ever had. And then also he has a way higher ceiling than Justin Fields does as well. I do think that Anthony Richardson could be a top 10 quarterback given the right situation. I just feel like with where he's at right now, with how low his confidence is, with how everything's been going with the benching and stuff like that, I really think that he's got to get something changed around. And I think that him being benched right now, this is a good chance for him to really just, slow the game down, get back into the swing of things, treat it more like the college game where you just got to slow down and you make those big plays every once in a while, yes, but you got to take those short passes in order to open up those big plays. And he's going to realize that, I think. As for Justin Fields, I do think that he's a solid quarterback. I don't think he's anything crazy. It's just like with Richardson, he's had those games once or twice, I think this year, maybe 3 times, where he's really just like dominated and really showed you what he can do. Justin Fields didn't do that in any of the games he played for the Steelers this year, in my opinion. So I'll have to rank him just one spot lower in this situation. Number 23, I have Russell Wilson. We just haven't seen too much of him just yet. He's been a solid quarterback, but he struggled against the Giants. However, they did not have their rookie Zach Frazier, amazing center so far, and against Dexter Lawrence. He's just been absolutely insane. So also that's a really tough one to rank, but I do think that Russell Wilson's a solid guy. And then number 22, Caleb Williams. Yes, he showed flashes, but at the same time, those first couple weeks were really, really ugly. And on top of that, even these last couple weeks obviously the Commanders really needed a cornerback, so they go out and get Lattimore. He plays them before that, going with 3 of what everyone thought was going to be solid guys, and Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and obviously DJ Moore. And they really couldn't do anything on offense in that game. So I think that Caleb Williams is at fault for a lot of things right now for the Chicago Bears decline. Obviously, they just lost to the Cardinals, who, again, don't have a great secondary. But at the same time, they just can't seem to get those games under control. They lose a lot of these games, I think, because Caleb Williams just that rookie inexperience. He's got to get a little bit more. But I think he's a solid guy, so I'll put him at 22. And then number 21, I have Trevor Lawrence. He has not shown me absolutely anything. I'm sorry. Everyone coming into this season told me Trevor Lawrence was going to be in that upper echelon of quarterbacks, top 15 quarterback, maybe even top 12. He's going to turn around the Jags. The Jags are finally going to return to relevance. They're going to be back. Where the hell is he? Where is he? Because it's got to be me out there, man. I got the same hair. It's just me out there playing instead. He looks terrible on the field sometimes. And some of the decisions he makes, he just cannot explain. He cannot defend. And I'm sorry for the Trevor Lawrence fans. I do think he still has a chance to become that quarterback. But we've been saying this for years now. We've been saying this for a couple seasons. And I understand you started 8-3 last year. But that's last year, man. You have to make the playoffs when you start 8-3, and they didn't. You have to be able to start a season off decently. I understand you had an unfavorable schedule, but so did teams like the Bills and the Ravens and these other teams. They had unfavorable schedules, and they're still afloat. They're still making by. And here you go, just showing me exactly why you can't really put it all together. I do still think Trevor Lawrence could be a top 15 quarterback in the league, but with how he's played so far this year, I just can't really put him in that conversation. I don't think he has bad weapons. Gabe Davis at times can be a good receiver. Christian Kirk is a solid option. You have Brian Thomas, the rookie, who's looked great as well. If he can stay healthy, he's been fine as well. And then you got a decent offensive line. You got a good defense, as long as they not secondary wise, but you got a good pass rush and stuff, good linebacking core.
Even scoffing at that, decent offensive line? No, they don't.
Yeah, they got Brandon Scherf. They got Brandon Scherf, and they had Cam Robinson until last week.
Cam Robinson was bad, though. Their offensive line sucks. But I'll get into that when I let you done talking.
Right, but I do think that Trevor Lawrence is a solid guy. I do think he can turn it around, but with what I've seen this season mixed in with everything else so far, it was kind of between a few different quarterbacks for here. You know, like you got Geno, you still have Sam Darnold, who I haven't mentioned yet either, obviously. But I do think that Darnold is a little better right now than Trevor Lawrence is, for the simple fact that I don't think either of these quarterbacks have really shown much in their careers after being high draft picks. It's just Darnold's actually making something happen right now, and Trevor Lawrence isn't. And that it can be attributed to systems, but at the same time, I think that just personally, Trevor Lawrence is not going to be the guy in Jacksonville as it hasn't really worked out for him. But
All right.
see that you've been making a couple faces. What do you got to say?
I think this is probably going to be the biggest disagreement we have in this entire ranking. I have him much higher. I'm not going to give away where I have him, but I think that is just absurdly hatred on him.
I think we flipped Darnold. I think we flipped Darnold and Lawrence. I'm not going to lie.
No, I have Lawrence much higher than just flipping them. Oh, you must have Darnold a lot higher. Maybe
I have Darnold decently higher.
My thing is, I think the biggest fault for this team is coach malpractice. They have a bottom 3 to 5 coaching staff in the entire league. Press Taylor
I think Doug Peterson's a solid coach. I just don't.
Yes, but Press Taylor is a complete retard. He, like, if you've seen the South Park clip of Eric Cartman at the Special Olympics, that's Press Taylor trying to call plays. Duh! That's him. I could go on Madden and just close my eyes and scroll around and pick plays better than him. Press Taylor's a retard. Anyways, also, you got to look at last year when they started 8-3. One, Trevor Lawrence concussion and a sprained ankle, played through both of them, and Christian Kirk went down, and Calvin Ridley just wasn't playing good last year. Their receiving core wasn't healthy when they went through the struggle. The receiving core sucked, and he wasn't healthy. And Press Taylor was calling plays. That's a big reason for the decline, because he was good at the beginning of last year when everyone was healthy, even with Press Taylor calling plays, which was shocking. Then this year, yes, you get Brian Thomas Jr. He's been amazing. Gabe Davis is, he's insanely mid. He's insanely mid, and he's not healthy right now. This past game against the Eagles, it was Brian Thomas Jr. Parker Washington was the wide receiver 2. Could you guess? Do you know who the wide receiver 3 was for the Jaguars?
I didn't watch the game, no.
So. Tim Jones. I've never even heard of that name before my Jaguars friend brought it up yesterday. And want to know who the wide receiver 4 was? Austin Trammell. Parker Washington, Tim Jones, and Austin Trammell being your wide receiver 3 through 4. What is Trevor Lawrence supposed to do? Like, with Press Taylor calling plays, you're giving him absolutely nothing. The O-line sucks. Travis Etienne has not been good this year. The only saving grace is, and Evan Ingram hasn't been healthy most of the year. Brian Thomas Jr.'s looked really good. Tank Bigsby's looked really good. And Trevor Lawrence has looked really good in moments. He's had some really good games. I'm not saying he's this top 5 to 10 quarterback, because he has made some really dumb throws. He's had some bad games. There's definitely some blame to go on him. But I just think they're not helping him out at all. They're not giving him good depth. They're not giving him, I don't even think, great offensive players. I think it's just a mishmash of players. And then the coaching is just awful. And I think that's why I have him much higher. I still think he's a much better quarterback. I think that you're just hating on him a lot, but that's your opinion. So that's all right. I'm not, that's just my opinion that you're hating on him, but that's the fun of sports. We're allowed to think.
Right. I don't think Lawrence is necessarily bad, but I mean, I just think I had to see a little bit more. I mean, last year,
understandable.
Starting 8-3, realistically, the fall off.
Yeah, it's due to injuries. He sprained his ankle.
Got a concussion. At the beginning of this year, they had everybody healthy. They still had the same.
But they still had Press Taylor calling plays.
But they had Press Taylor last year to start the season, and he went 8-3 with him. They had Christian Kirk. They even got Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas on top of that, and they have Evan Ingram for another year. They even got Tank Bigsby.
Evan Ingram got injured in week 1.
Well, it doesn't matter about Evan Ingram then specifically, but
Gabe Davis isn't that good, and Christian Kirk started the year very slow. Also,
he still eats up the guy.
Yeah. Well, Press Taylor. The thing is, I think teams figured out exactly what offense he's going to run, because it's extremely basic and vanilla. And last year it may have worked at the beginning because it was his first year calling plays. I think defenses figured it out, so they were able to adjust a lot better, and he didn't adjust at all. I think that's part of it. I get it. I get it. The drop off, the bad start. I get it. I just think there's less blame to him than other guys. But we can move on.
I guess we'll see whenever they actually make a competent team in Jacksonville.
Yes. If they, I'll give you this. If they fire their coach and they bring in like a Liam Cohen or a Ben Johnson, they bring in an offensive guru, and then they buff up the offensive line and they go and get deeper at receiver. They do these things to really help him out, and he's still bad next year. I will concede that it's him. But right now, I just don't want to blame him for all the other issues on that team.
No, that's understandable.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's move on. At number 20, I have Tua. 19, I have Aaron Rodgers. At 18, I have Kirk O'Chains. At 17, I have Brock Purdy. And 16, I have Geno Smith. Tua, I think all these guys are in the same tier. I just don't trust. I mean, maybe you can move to a little bit higher, but I just don't trust him against good teams and good defenses. I understand he's played decent these last 2 weeks, but it's been mostly just the run game and a lot of checkdowns. He hasn't really pushed the ball down the field at all. I get that's kind of like the new norm, and he's playing well in it. He's made some plays on his feet, but he just hasn't shown me that he can go and beat a good defense. He put up a lot of points on the Bills, but without Matt Milano, without Christian Benford, without Dwayne Carter, and it was mostly just a Devon Achane or Raheem Mostert beating us. He didn't really have to do that much.
Right.
So I've never been a big fan of Tua. Maybe I'm hating on him a little bit too much. I just think a lot of quarterbacks have played better than him this year. I understand the injuries and stuff, but even before the injuries, he wasn't looking great. I don't really trust him. Rodgers, he's rapidly falling down this list. I could put him lower than Tua, but I trust Rodgers more just because I've seen him do it a lot more. And he has had times this year where he's looked really good. The Patriots game and the Texans game. He has looked really good in those games. He looked good in the Bills game for parts of it. He looked good in the Patriots game for parts of it. Like, he has had some real bright spots. So I'm cautiously putting him ahead of Tua right now, but I could easily drop him like that. It's like right there. Tua is kind of on the up and up, Roger on the downward spiral. So very close. Kirk at 18. He has played good this year, but he is just not mobile at all. I think it's more so due to the system being really good and the weapons being really good, making his job really easy. He has played good. He's had some really good games. He's been able to dot up. But the thing is, I just think quarterbacks overall this year, a lot of those like mid-tier quarterbacks that I kind of had him above of have looked really, really good this year. So like that's where it's like he's looked decent, but the quarterbacks around his range have looked better. So I have to put them above him. Because of his age, coming off the Achilles. 17, Brock Purdy. You kind of see this year, with some of his weapons being injured. He had weapons from time to time. It's not like he had nothing. He always had at least decent weapons in every single game, and he just hasn't looked that great. I mean, they're 4-4, and it's like, yeah, I get Christian McCaffrey's been out. Yeah, I get Brandon Ayuk's been having his issues. Yeah, I get Debo and Kittle have missed games here or there. But he's had at least 2 or 3 of these pieces in every single game. Jordan Mason's been great in the run game. Their offensive line's played great. You still have Kyle Shanahan calling plays. And for you just to be like the Chiefs game, he was god-awful. He's just had some really, really bad games where it's
3
like
picks.
You're just showing more and more that you're just a system quarterback that can play really good in a system. And if you're just that, can't really put you much higher. And then Geno Smith's had some really dumbass plays. He has had some really face-palming plays, but he has looked really good from time to time. And I think the issue is that offensive line is the worst in the league right now. It's basically a turnstile. They can't block a single soul. It's disgusting to watch. Their center can't even snap the ball properly and steps on Geno's foot. Like the offensive line. It's like they're before the game's going on FanDuel and betting on the other team's defense to do really good, because betting on the over on the sacks, betting on the other team to win, because it's like they're trying to lose. Like I think I could just basically stand there and let someone run me over and they would get to the quarterback slower than the Seahawks offensive line right now. It's that bad.
Yeah.
So they're doing him no favors at all. And I don't think Ryan Grubb's a great offensive coordinator either. DK Metcalf's now missed a couple of games, so I think he's not had a lot going in his favor, and he still had some really good games. So I want to give him his flowers and rank him right here.
Yeah, so you just mentioned Geno Smith. He starts my top 20. He is number 20 for me. Number 19, I have Tua. 18, Rodgers. 17, Purdy, which we agree on. And then 16 is Sam Darnold, who we finally get to there. So don't get me wrong. Geno Smith's a solid quarterback, but at the same time, while you can attribute some of that to this offensive line, who have they really beaten with Geno Smith playing well? Geno Smith has won games against the worst teams I've ever seen in the league.
I think his best game of the season, it wasn't a loss though.
The Lions.
That Lions game, he was absolutely electric. So
no,
so I want to give, but I get what you're saying. They haven't beaten anyone.
You're talking about a Lions team that if they can't get if they can't get to the quarterback, if they can't pressure him fast enough, any quarterback could stand back there and dot them up with how bad the secondaries played at times. The corners get exposed, and you got DK Metcalf still. Obviously, bless you. Obviously, they just lost him or whatever, but still, you had Tyler Lockett, you have Jackson Smith and Jigba. That offensive line has been, yes, I will agree, it's been bad. And while Grubb hasn't been the best play caller, you still haven't really been doing too great There's a couple of these games where I thought could go either way for Seattle, and they barely eke out a win against New England. They beat the Denver Broncos in week 1 with a rookie Bo Nix playing in his first career start. You beat the you lost to the Giants with Daniel Jones. And then in week 3, they beat some other team that I can't remember off the top of my head that was also really bad.
Dolphins without Tua.
The Dolphins without Tua. There you go. Oh, yeah, the Skylar Thompson clip with his butt cheeks hanging out. But anyway.
I thought it was photoshopped at first. I'm like, there's no way this could be real. And it was.
Dude, literally. But Geno Smith's a solid guy. Don't get me wrong. I still think he's a decent guy in the league. It's just I don't think it's going to be much more than that for the rest of his career. As for Tua, I think the only reason I had him this high is for the simple fact that basically that Dolphins team just looked terrible without him. I don't think they had the right backup in. Like we talked about before the show, I just don't think they had the right guy to replace Tua to play the system well. They need an accurate passer, and they didn't have one. However, I still do think Tua is a solid quarterback. I don't think he's anything special. I think he can offer a little bit of ability to move around and throw the ball. And also that left-handedness just kind of tricks some defenses a little bit of time with some off-handed play actions and stuff as well. So I do think he's a decent quarterback. So he's at 19. Rodgers is, again, he's falling down my list as well. He's at 18 right now, but he's on a short leash. He's got like a little bit of room right now with how he's played it in these last few games. But I do think that he's got to get a little bit better for this Jets team to actually succeed. Also, they went all in on him, and he's not what they expected. So he is in the lower echelon for me. Number 17, I have Brock Purdy, same ranking as you. I just think he's a game-managing quarterback. He can do great in the system he's in. And I understand Justin Jefferson is the number 1 option in all of football that is not a quarterback. But Christian McCaffrey is certainly number 2, in my opinion. He is a phenomenal player. He can run. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And yes, Jordan Mason can run the ball. You need that receiving threat, though. You need that receiving threat, and they didn't have that without McCaffrey. But at the same time, Brock Purdy was hyped up to be this great quarterback, but in reality, he's just a system quarterback that's working with one of the best offensive minds in Shanahan, one of the best supporting casts at all times, really. Jawan Jennings has gone nuts in a few games this season. You know, you had Debo, you had George Kittle in some of these games, and you can just kind of rotate. Debo would be out, but Kittle would be in. Kittle would be out, Debo would be in. Brandon Ayuk would show up out of nowhere and have a solid game. Or, you know, you always really could rely on somebody in this offense, like you mentioned. So for Brock Purdy, the one thing that really gave him a little bit more for me was the fact that he's still a younger guy. He can still develop into a decent quarterback. And then also he also offers some value in the scrambling game as well. He can run around as he did in the Patriots game and even the Chiefs game for bits and pieces of those games. So I do think he can run around and be a little more agile than he shows at times. So I'll go ahead and put him there. And then lastly, Sam Darnold. What you have said about Sam Darnold, I do agree with. This is his first year finally doing something, but this is also his first year where he's actually had a decent team, you know? And I guess you could say the same thing with Trevor Lawrence because, you know, Lawrence really hasn't had that either. But at the same time, Darnold right now, I don't think he necessarily has had the best supporting cast, though. Yes, Aaron Jones has been solid, but Justin Jefferson, he's a great receiver, yes. But outside of him, Jordan Addison was out until the Packers game this year. He didn't play. They had Jalen Naylor as the number 2 option. Hawkinson was on the IR and on the PUP list as well. Realistically, he didn't have that great of options outside of him. I think it was more so about the fact that Darnold was just playing smart football, and that comes down to something that a lot of quarterbacks in this league just can't do. So I value him a little bit more than those quarterbacks because football is not just about your athletic ability, your talent. It's about being able to be smart with the football as well. You don't want to be the reason why your team loses, and he is definitely not the reason why. He has looked phenomenal in these games he's played, and albeit it has been with a great supporting cast. Kevin O'Connell's done great things with him as well, but I'm gonna give him his flowers just like you gave Geno his flowers. I just think you got to give him his flowers and put him here at this ranking at 16. I just think he's a solid quarterback. He's not amazing, you know, but he's right there in the middle of the pack, and I think that 16 fits him well.
Yeah, that's fair. I personally just think
I'm interested you have Cousins lower.
I just think it's not even anti-Cousins. It's just a lot of these like game manager, middle of the pack quarterbacks I had going into the season have just played really, really good. So I had to move them up. So just by default, Cousins had to move down. Like a lot of the guys I had ahead of him are like in the tier with him. Like spoiler, like a Baker Mayfield and like a Jared Goff and a Geno. Like those were guys, the kind of guys I had in that tier. I just thought that they've been more impressive this year. So I kind of had to move them up by default, moving Kirk down. And then obviously the one rookie that's kind of blown off, I had to move him down because of that, because of Jane Daniels, who will be coming up. Like it's not even anti-Kirk. It's just the guys. There's just guys that have jumped him. That's kind of all it is.
Exactly. I feel you there.
But I guess my thing is, I feel like you're just underplaying how bad that offensive line is for the Seahawks. I just think
I think they're bad.
I think it's just extremely impressive what Geno's been. I just think it's been extremely impressive what Geno has done with how god awful that offensive line is. I think if you flipped Geno and Sam Darnold, I think the Vikings offense would be better than it is now. The Seahawks offense would be worse. But I get it. I understand. Sam Darnold's look great. It's kind of we have them in the same tier. We just have them in different order.
Right.
Basically. Really, there's only been one big disagreement, and that's the T-Law, which I'm about to get into as we move on. To 15, I have Kyler Murray. 14, this is where I have Trevor Lawrence. 13, I have Jared Goff. 12, I have Baker Mayfield. 11, I have Dak Prescott. With Kyler, he has looked great at times. He has looked bad at times. I think part of it is I just don't trust his ability to push the ball down the field. Most of his passing has just been a kind of like dink and dunk to running backs and tight ends and short passes to receivers. I just don't see him pushing the ball down the field that much. And I think come playoff time, to be able to beat good teams, you would have to push the ball down the field. So that's where I kind of have him a little bit lower, is I trust these quarterbacks to push the ball down the field more. But he's this high because he is electric with his feet. He does help that run game because of the running threat he brings. And he has been very efficient with the quick throws, getting the ball out quick, throwing with anticipation. So I want to give him credit there, but his inability to really push the ball on the field is kind of like hampered my ability to put him higher. And then T-Law, already got into how much I like T-Law. I just think it's coach malpractice there. Jared Goff, he has played absolutely amazing this year, but I still think I give more credit to the system than I do him. Best offensive coordinator in football, best offensive line in football, best running back duo in football, one of the better defenses in football, one of the best wide receivers in football, one of the best tight ends in football. I mean, what is there not to like about the only weakness is their wide receivers outside of Amon-Ra aren't great. But because of how strong their run game is and their play action, it doesn't really matter. Jameson Williams has looked better. Like they had Josh Reynolds has come in and played well. They have players that can fit the role. Ben Johnson just dials things up to get people open, and he has played great. But he hasn't. I just feel like he hasn't had to do a lot of outer structure. He hasn't had to face a lot of pressure, and those are things like if I'm going to put you higher, I want to see how you react to when there's pressure in your face. How do you react when you have to make something out of nothing? And that's kind of the difference I have between the guys above him and him. And that's why I have him sitting at 13. Baker, what Baker has done these last 2 weeks without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans throwing to K-Dot and Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer and all these guys, it's been very, very impressive. He just went into Kansas City and dropped 24 points throwing it to these guys. One of the best defenses in football that have held better offenses and better quarterbacks to less points. Like this defense has been absolutely cooking this Chiefs defense, and to go into Kansas City and do that, extremely impressive. Last week against Atlanta, dropped 26. Like he has been cooking all year long. Yes, he has thrown some interceptions that he'd like to have back, but he has improved on his ability to move in the pocket, make plays out of nothing, run. Like a lot of these things that like I didn't see in years past, he's really shown me. But because he's had some really dumb interceptions, I can't really put him any higher. And then Dak Prescott at 11. This isn't more based on this year. This is more of just like a legacy thing. Personally, last year, I had him as the second best quarterback in the league. I thought he was the second best quarterback in the league last year. And I thought he should have been second in MVP behind Josh Allen. But that's a whole nother thing. I thought he was absolutely lights out last year. Him and CeeDee Lamb lit the world on fire. But this year, I mean, god-awful running game, god-awful receiver production out of CeeDee Lamb. And then CeeDee Lamb himself hasn't been the same. And then losing Kellen Moore, it's put more Or actually, they lost Kellen Moore the year before, but people I think have figured out Mike McCarthy. He's kind of like a one-trick pony. He'll be good for 1 year, but he's so outdated. It doesn't take you that long to figure out exactly what he's going to run. Teams are expecting it. Offensive line's been disappointing after losing Tyron Smith. They have Zach Martin and Tyler Smith, and that's really it. The rest of the offensive line's been really, really uninspiring. He just doesn't have much to work with. And yes, he hasn't looked great this year. So this is why I dropped him a couple. I had him in the top 10 going into the season, so I had to drop him some. But because of how he played last year and in years past, will still put him above some of these other guys just because I got to give him, I can't just completely discredit him for a year that's kind of gone south. Not really that much his fault, in my opinion.
Yeah, so my rankings here, a very similar ranking, actually. Two of them are the exact same. Number 15 is Kyler Murray, which is the first one that I think we both hit on in this one. I think Murray's a solid quarterback. He can run around. He can make some plays with his legs, but I just got to see his ability to push that ball down the field. He can't really do too much in that offense. I feel like he's just got to be able to show me a little bit more, especially against these really good football teams that eventually they'll have to run into. So I do think that he's a solid guy, definitely in the upper echelon of these quarterbacks. So 15's going to fit him pretty nicely. As for number 14, I have Kirk O'Chains. I think he's a solid quarterback. Again, Kirk Tober really helps him in his rankings a little bit, but I still think he's a good quarterback. You know, he can definitely make things happen in this system, and albeit Darnell Mooney has looked great, but at the same time, how much can you attribute that to Darnell Mooney himself, or how much can you attribute that to Kirk Cousins making him look great? So realistically, I don't know. I think I'm splitting hairs at that point. It's really interesting to see for those guys. I think they're both solid, though. Anyway, for Kirk Cousins, I really do think that he's the reason, like, this Falcons team is doing so great. Obviously, if they had Desmond Ridder, they would not be in this conversation.
I think that's partly because Desmond Ridder is like a bottom.
Just ass. Yeah.
Yeah, he's complete dog
but
shit.
But at the same time, I think Kirk Cousins is a solid quarterback.
Fair.
I'll definitely rank him here at 14. Number 13, I do end up getting into Dak Prescott here a little bit sooner than you. I think he's still a very good quarterback. It's just before the injury this year, he has looked absolutely lost out there at times. Realistically, Tolbert's developed into a number 2, but outside of him and CeeDee Lamb, they haven't been getting much production from Ferguson, who has looked really just gone at times. And for Dak, I just need to see him cut down on those turnovers, really. And he just can't really do that. A lot of what everyone was saying with Josh Allen last year, no one's talking about this shit with Dak Prescott. I mean, Josh Allen's done it for a couple seasons. Dak Prescott does it for a couple years. And now all of a sudden, no one's talking about Dak, but Allen's thrown 2 picks this year. And people are saying, oh, he's getting back to that form where he's just going to throw interceptions every game. So it's interesting to see with this situation as a Bills fan. But I do think Dak's still a good quarterback. I think he can definitely make things happen in this game, and he definitely has the rushing ability that you want in a quarterback nowadays. He's that improviser, not a scrambler, improviser. There's a very big difference, and I do think that he can definitely do that. Number 12, the next one we agree on is Baker Mayfield. I think he's a very solid quarterback as well. I just think that there's a few guys that are better than him. But what he's done with the lack of weapons he's had these last couple weeks, you just cannot, stir away from that. You cannot look away. He's been absolutely lights out at times. And to go into Kansas City and do that against what has been the best team in football, especially on the defensive side of the ball, literally single-handedly losing me my fantasy week. I needed 3 points from the Chiefs defense, and they managed to get me only 2 points. So thank you, Baker Mayfield, for that. Absolutely heartbreaking. But anyway, back to this. Baker Mayfield just had a great game. He's looked great at a lot of points this season. The turnovers are really what's going to hold him back in my rankings as well. I really was debating between putting him a little lower, considering Dak Prescott's at 13 because of the turnovers too. So it's the same argument, but I think Baker Mayfield's done more with less considering these last couple games. So I put him up over him. And then lastly, number 11, Jayden Daniels. Very good quarterback. Very, very, very good quarterback. He's been able to run around, and he has completely ruined what I thought was going to be the worst team out of the top 3 teams this year. Thought he was a terrible draft choice for the Commanders. I thought they really messed up not picking Drake May, and I still do think that there's a chance that that is wrong for them. But with how he's looked this season, he has been phenomenal, and I'm going to have to lean with my gut and tell him not top 10 just now. I do think he's a solid guy, but you're not in that top 10, man. You're right there. You're knocking on the door of these guys like Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, CJ Stroud, all these guys that we'll get into. But you're right there with those guys. You're definitely getting there. But this is your first season doing this. I need to see a little bit more. I need to see you be able to really show me what you can do in the playoffs. in order to rank you a little bit higher than this. But 11, I think, is very fair for a rookie quarterback. Absolutely amazing on his end, as that rounds out my top choices. The one thing I really do want to touch on here is Jared Goff. I do think Jared Goff is a very, very good quarterback, and I think he's a little bit higher than where you ranked him. Personally, I have him inside of my top 8, so I'll tell you that much. But we'll get into it here in a little bit.
I guess my thing is I've seen him when he's not in an elite system, and he has been bad. When he is not in an elite system, he's bad. His first 2 years in Detroit, bad. His last 2 years with the Rams, bad. So that's where it's like, has he miraculously gotten this much better, or is it just the system around him? That's my thing. Is I like to not just look at production. I'm not saying you are, but I like to also see what are the reasonings behind this production. Is this offensive line killing him, or is it really helping him? Like, my thing with Goff is he is basically like a perfect system quarterback. If you can get a great run game, if you can get a strong offensive line, if you can get him protection, he will find the open guy and he will hit him because he is a smart quarterback and extremely
very accurate. Yes.
My thing is he is bad under pressure. If you do not have a strong offensive line and he can't run play action, he's going to struggle. And that's where it's like, I just can't put him above a lot of these guys because I just don't think he can do as much as these other guys. I think these other guys in the situation would be even better because they can do these things, but they can also do other things. Because I've seen Jared Goff be in not amazing situations and be bad. And I just can't put him much higher than I don't know if I'm ever going to put him in my top 10 just because of what I saw that like 4-year stretch from basically the Super Bowl, the 2018 Super Bowl till 2022. Basically that like 4 like ish stretch of bad football. It's like I don't think I can ever put him in my top 10 because of that. Just because of I'm like now I just do not trust that it's him. I trust that it's the system.
Right, that's fair.
Maybe if next year, if Ben Johnson leaves, if Frank Ragnow leaves, if maybe one of their offensive linemen leaves, and he is still putting up these insane numbers despite having a worse supporting cast, maybe I can put him into my top 10. But with how good this, I just can't. But that's just me. Moving in
to the top.
I don't really have any gripes with, I guess, yours other than obviously the T-Law thing, but we already went over that. I just think I guess a little bit of just the Dak thing, just because of how good he was last year. I feel like moving him down that far is a little I don't agree with, but nothing too crazy. But moving on at 10, I have Jane Daniels. He's playing like a top 5 quarterback this year. Or actually, no, he's playing like a top 7-8 quarterback this year, but he's a rookie, so I can't put him that high. 9, Jalen Hurts. He has kind of actually really proved himself to me this year. He has looked really good despite like his receivers just battling injuries. Like he's half the season without AJ Brown. Devontae Smith missed a game. Dallas Goedert's missed games. The offensive line's not as good as it had been in years past. Like the left side of the line with Mailata and what's his face, Landon Dickerson have been great. Lane Johnson is the right tackle, has been great, but the center and right guard have been kind of iffy. Obviously, Saquon's kind of made up for it. He has still had great weapons. That's why I can't really put him much higher. But Jalen Hurts these last couple weeks has been absolutely cooking. And it's not like he has great coaching because it's not like Landon or not. Why did I say Landon? It's not like I can't think of the name of the coach. Who is the Phillies head coach? I'm blanking on his name right now. Nick Sirianni. Why was I blanking on his name? He has not been a good coach. I think he is a bottom 5 coach in this league. And then Kellen Moore is decent, but it's not like he's anything crazy, nothing to write home about. And I think Jalen Hurts has just been great. He has been really good throwing the ball down the field. I saw a stat like when he throws the ball like 15 to 20 yards on the field these last couple of games. It's been just absolutely absurd numbers. So I have him there. Jordan Love at 8. He is kind of just like an ultimate gunslinger. He'll have some really great games. He'll have some kind of not great games, but it's not like he has the greatest offensive system to work with. Offensive line still has its issues, and the receivers they're really deep at receiver, but it's not like they have anyone that I can say, yeah, you're a top 15 to 20 wide receiver in this league. Jaden Reed might be slowly creeping his way in. Romeo Doubs is decent. Dontavian Wicks is decent. Christian Watson's decent. Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, they're decent. Josh Jacobs is a good back, but he has a lot of decent players, but nothing really like top level.
Yeah, there you
go.
Like
if he gets a top level guy, I really want to see how he'd play. Like all the quarterbacks listed above him have at least one receiver better than, or have at least played with one receiver at least better than anyone Jordan Love has. So I do want to, like, that's part of it. Like, I want to see how he can play with a top level receiver before I put him higher. But I think 8's a good spot. 7, CJ Stroud. I can't really put him any higher than this. He's kind of had a little bit of a sophomore slump. Part of it's awful offensive line. Ben Slowick hasn't been great. Nico's been injured. Stephon Diggs just went down. Tank Dell hasn't, besides this last game, hasn't looked great. The receiving depth is really bad. Joe Mixon's missed half the year. Like, he has had a lot going against him on this offensive side, but he also just hasn't been great. I mean, didn't have a great game against the Jets. He almost single-handedly choked the game away against the Bills by allowing the strip sack, and his only 20-yard line, and then getting absolutely user lurked by Terrell Bernard when you were in field goal range that would have put the game away. Like, he has just had some really, and then the intentional grounding that took his team out of field goal range. Like, he has had some really boneheaded plays. Against the Packers, he had under 100 yards. Like, he's just had some really, really rough games. I understand he's had some issues that's outside of his control. That's why I'm not fully dropping him, because of how good he looked last year. But I can't really put him above these other guys, because these other guys I've seen overcome these issues that he hasn't yet. 6, I have Matthew Stafford. You know how much I love Matthew Stafford. I love this man. He is a dog. He is so good at football. He just can sling it anywhere. I mean, he was putting up decent numbers and even won a game with a makeshift offensive line that they found at a high school and a bunch of random people they found off the street to play wide receiver. Like Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, and Tyler Johnson, throwing the ball to those guys while having no time. And he was still throwing for over 200 yards a game. He was still playing really, really well. And then you see he finally gets his offensive line healthy. He finally gets Cooper Kupp back. He finally gets Puka Nacua back. And they drop, what was it? How many points against the Vikings defense? 28? Was it?
29?
Because 20. They dropped 28 against the Vikings.
20, but the safety.
Yep, they dropped 28 points on the Vikings. They dropped 27 on the Seahawks. He's won back-to-back games. Now this team's fully healthy, and he's put up great numbers in both games. He's absolutely cooking, and I love to see it out of him because I love that man so much.
Yeah, very true. But I mean, basically, I really like your list. I won't lie. Yeah, okay, so yeah. I really do like the list. So my number 10 is CJ Stroud. And I understand CJ Stroud's looked great at times, but now that I really liked what you said with Jordan Love. He hasn't had the weapons of these other quarterbacks, and that includes CJ Stroud on this list. For me, he finally started to show that he's human when he doesn't have someone. You know, he's had Nico. You know, he's had someone at all times, really. He had Tank Dell last year who looked great, too. So, I mean, even this year, he's had Tank Dell. He's had Nico Collins. He's had Diggs at times. Now that he loses some of those guys, now his only best guys are Dell and Xavier Hutchinson. Now he's starting to look a little bit more like human. And the reason why he's at 10 here is because you put 11 for me. I put Jayden Daniels at 11. And he's right there with Jayden Daniels to me. They're both young quarterbacks that have looked great. They've been better than expected coming out of the draft. Except the thing is Stroud's in his second year, and we've seen the sophomore slump. We've seen people recover from the sophomore slump like Baker Mayfield. I do think that he can have that resurgence next year. But the thing is for this year specifically, he hasn't looked that great. He's been mediocre at times, 86 passing yards against the Packers. Almost lost in that game against the Bills, like you mentioned. He just hasn't looked that great at times, so I'm going to put him at 10. Number 9, I have C.J. Stroud's doppelganger in a lot of facets is Jalen Hurts to me. I feel like they're quarterbacks that are they're interesting mixtures, but I think that right here, this was the hardest one for me to choose was Hurts or C.J. Stroud when I got it in the QB ranking. I could not decide for the life of me which one to pick. I ended up leaning with Jalen Hurts, though, just because of that added rushing ability. He can really run the football a lot, and obviously he's a merchant for the touchdown, so I won't say the touchdown aspect, but he can run the ball. He can take a 25-yard run into the end zone. He can just find ways to do that. He's very, very powerful in those legs. He's just being able to make moves. But I do think for C.J. Stroud's point, I don't think that, Jalen Hurts has been able to do too much with the lack of weapons either. But at the same time, he has been without a Brown or without a Smith or without both Brown and Smith and only Barkley. But he still always had somebody. But at the same time, so has C.J. Stroud. And it's just which one's done more specifically this year, and that's Jalen Hurts, especially with that added rushing bonus. I had to go with him here at 9. Number 8 is finally where I get to Jared Goff. I kind of hinted at him being in my top 8. He is my number 8. He's a very good quarterback. And the thing is I understand that stretch there, but at the same time, the Lions looked like complete trash that one year, and he led them back from the depths of like the dead to come back and make a playoff spot almost that year, finishing 9-8, right? I believe. And they came back from out of nowhere to make that record. And the thing is at that time, they didn't really have these guys resurgence. You know, they didn't have these big name
They had
guys
the
at the
offensive
time.
line.
Amon-Ra wasn't. Yeah, they had the all line, but that's it. They didn't
They
have
and Ben
the big
Johnson.
name guys. Yeah, but still, I'm saying that Amon-Ra wasn't Amon-Ra yet. You know, they didn't have Jamison Williams. They didn't have Jahmyr Gibbs. You know, they didn't even have David Montgomery at the time. It was Javonte Williams, I believe.
He also didn't play nearly as good as he is right now. His numbers weren't as good. So
I'm not saying that, but he did a very good job with.
Oh yeah,
team.
I'll give him credit where credit's due. You know,
the thing is even now you can argue, and I definitely will argue in favor of this, that yes, Ben Johnson can scheme guys open, but at the same time, he has made some amazing throws in tight windows.
I'm not saying he can't make any throws.
Right now, where we're at in the NFL season with how he's played, he is the most accurate quarterback in the NFL by far.
I can get behind that. I can agree.
And the thing is you have that has to be credited for something. You have to credit him for that by putting him somewhere a little bit higher. And I feel like with how good the Detroit Lions have played, I feel like he is a good enough quarterback to get them over the hump where they're trying to go inevitably, which is to a Super Bowl. I do think that, spoiler alert, my Super Bowl prediction all season has been Chiefs-Lions, and now it looks like the best prediction ever.
Yeah,
so, realistically here, bless you. The man's sick over there, but
I am. No, I almost didn't show up to class today. I've been dealing with a slight fever.
Oh.
So thank God for cold and flu. The cold and flu medicine. I popped some at like 3 this morning, and that's kind of what got me through. I'm gonna pop some after this because it's kind of wearing off.
Right. But either way, man, I think Goff's is still a very good quarterback. He's definitely in that top 10 for me. So go ahead and give me number 8 for him. Number 7, Jordan Love. Again, he's a very good quarterback. He can make moves with these younger guys who aren't really, lethal threats in any regard. None of them are really great. They're all decent guys, but none of them are better than the other, in my opinion. They're all literally, if you had to give me a wide receiver ranking, they would probably all be back to back to back. That's how close it is between these guys. None of them are better than the other. They're all just solid guys. And so I do think that he can make it work with this supporting cast, that he's got to be credited there. He's looked great. Obviously, he means a lot to this Green Bay team. They've looked great with him at quarterback. So number 7's fair for me, for him. And then number 6, we agree here, Matthew Stafford. Very, very good quarterback, aging veteran who's looked every bit as advertised since coming to LA. Obviously, being able to work with absolutely nothing at the supporting cast at times, it feels like he's looked solid. And I do think that he is in that top 7 ranking for the quarterbacks. You could really put him 6 or 7 for a lot of people, but I have him at 6. I think he's a very good quarterback, and he proved it this year without the lack of weapons he had.
Yeah, no, I agree. So it looks like we have the exact same top 6, which I kind of makes sense. I feel like it's the consensus top 6. I think I've realized one thing, like through this quarterback rankings, is that you put more on the quarterback and I put more on the system around him. That's where a lot of the disagreements have been. I'd be like, oh, I think it's more of the system for why these numbers are the way you are, and you think it's more the quarterback, which is fine. That's just how we see the game. Totally fine. But I think that's what I've kind of realized. Like the T-Law debate, and the Jared Goff debate are two examples. The Dak debate, I think those are examples of me putting more on the system around him and you putting more on the quarterback, which I get it. I definitely get it. The quarterback is the most important position.
I think what I do mostly is I rank them both. It's just which one do I think is more, valuable in the sense.
Well, no, I know. And that's the thing. I do the same thing. I guess it looks like I tend more towards the size of the system having more of an impact, and you tend to side more with the quarterback. I mean, we're still pretty similar. Our rankings are for the most part pretty similar. Really, the only big difference is this T-Law and Goff. Everyone else has been within like 1, 2, 3 of each other.
Yeah.
Those are really the two big ones. But I guess this is the top 5. Drum roll. My at number 5, I have Justin Herbert. Number 4, I have Joe Burrow. Number 3, I have Lamar Jackson, and number 2, I have Josh Allen. And we already said it. Mahomes is 1. You
Yeah.
disagree? You're an idiot. Pretty self-explanatory. I think Justin Herbert hate has been absolutely unwarranted and insane. Last year, he had basically just Keenan Allen, who was physically washed but could get open, so we just peppered him with targets, and then no one else to throw to when Mike Williams went down. A bad offensive line, no run game, a complete retard as a coach. You saw the first game Justin Herbert goes down, they were losing 63-7 at one point. Like, just an absolutely pathetic disaster of an organization there. And then this year you draft offensive linemen, you go get him a receiver, you build this run game in, you build this defense, and you see how good he's been recently. He still has bad weapons, and yet he's been so good throwing the ball that he's been able to convince Greg Roman to be more of a pass-heavy team. And Greg Roman is like the most I want to run person ever. Like,
literally.
He threw for 350 yards in a game with Will Dissly being his leading receiver. Like, he's throwing to Will Dissly, a rookie Ladd McConkey, who I love, but is a rookie, Quentin Johnson, who I still think is potential, but it's Quentin Johnson, and Josh Palmer, and other bunch of no-name randoms, and then J.K. Dobbins' resurgence running the ball. The interior offensive line still isn't good. The tackles have been elite, and he still has this team in a race to make the playoffs. I think will easily make the playoffs. He has been absolutely insane. I honestly, if I did an MVP ranking, I would probably have him in my top 5. I probably would have my top 5 for MVP because he doesn't have the most gaudy numbers, but what he's done with that system, I'd put him in my top 5. I would have to really break it down, but he might be as high as 3 for me. I don't know if I would, but no chance touching 1-2. I think 1-2 is undebatable right now. But number 4, I have Joe Burrow. He has been absolutely cooking this year. I actually moved him down a spot from earlier, but I don't have it because of Joe Burrow. I have it because of the guy I moved ahead of him in Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson is just playing out of this world right now. Joe Burrow is playing amazing, but when you're splitting hairs right now, I'm just going to go with the guy who's played better recently. Before, I had always had Burrow ahead of Lamar because of playoff reasons. He's been better in the playoffs, but with how good Lamar has been this season, I just can't put him ahead of him right now. But Joe Burrow has been great. I mean, he just threw 5 touchdowns last week without T. Higgins and none of them going to Jamar Chase. He has been great. I think he has over 20 touchdowns, not that many interceptions. Still I don't like Zach Taylor as a coach. The defense outside of Trey Hendrickson sucks. Jamar Chase has been like the only healthy weapon there. Chase Brown's been cool. Mike Gesicki's been cool. T. Higgins has played like 2 games. They don't have much of a run game, and yet he's still out there dicing people up and absolutely cooking. So I got to give credit where credit is due. Joe Burrow is still that dog. Then Lamar at number 3. Personally, I just can't put him higher than this because I think there's a gap between him and these other guys and the 2 ahead of him. Lamar is absolutely electric. He has been insane this year. This is some insane numbers. This MVP race is going to be crazy. The only reason there's a gap between him and the other 2 guys is because he has been statistically one of the worst quarterbacks of all time in the playoffs, while these other guys have raised their level in the playoffs. The 2 guys ahead of him have been statistically 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in the playoffs, while he's been statistically one of the worst. So I can't really put him there. And then number 2, Josh Allen, my boy, favorite athlete of all time. Love that man. You can call me biased. I don't care. I just think he is an absolute dog. What he's doing this year with Amari Cooper for basically a game, one week, because he was non-existent / injured in the Seahawks game. He played 35% of the snaps in the Titans game and hasn't played. And then Shakir has missed some time. James Cook's missed some time. Like, he has dealt, like, the offense has been mostly healthy, but it's not like they've been uberly talented. Joe Brady's still trying to find his footing as a play caller. The offensive line's been inconsistent. The run game's been inconsistent, yet he still has 20 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. And realistically, it should be 22 touchdowns to 1 interception if Keon can catch the ball on that slant and a bogus holding call doesn't get called in this last game. Obviously, those are ifs, so I'm not counting it. It's 20-2. I'm not going to, but I'm just saying, like, he has had a lot of things go against him, and he's still putting absolutely insane numbers. This was supposed to be a rebuild year for the Bills as they lost so much talent in the offseason, yet they're sitting at 7-2 as the 2 seed. Like, it's because of that man right there, JA17. And then Patrick Mahomes at 1. Not really much of a debate. Been the best quarterback in the league for like 5 years now. He won 2 MVPs, 3 Super Bowls, 3 Super Bowl MVPs. His numbers don't look that great this year, but he hasn't had shit to throw to. The tackles haven't been good. He's been dealt with so many injuries. His top 2 wide receivers, his number 1 running back, offensive line injuries, and yet he still cooks. Yes, his numbers don't look great, but he's been throwing it to Mecole Hardman, Xavier Worthy, who's god awful, Travis Kelce, who's been inconsistent. Like, now that they finally got a D-Hop, you saw how good he looked in this last game. Pat Mahomes had a really good game because he finally had a receiver to throw to, and I think that will continue until he gets dethroned, until he loses like multiple times in the playoffs. Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, there's not much you said that I can't really agree with in that conversation. As right here, my top 5, drum roll for me as well. But number 5 stays the same. Justin Herbert. You got JH. He's looked absolutely great. He is a top 5 quarterback in this league, and he cannot be proven wrong. Realistically, I think that Drake May can develop into a Justin Herbert style quarterback. They're both very similar, where they have the cannon of an arm. They have that improviser talent. They can run the ball if they need to, but it's not their main trait. It's not something they can really develop fully into their game, but it's something if you need a 3rd and 8 and there's that room, he's going to take it and he's going to get there. It's just about the IQ. But back on topic here, I think Justin Herbert's an amazing quarterback. What he's done with the lack of weapons this year was all you really needed to solidify his top 5 bid in the NFL quarterback rankings. Realistically, he is definitely right up there with a lot of these guys. He played with a washed Keenan Allen last year who really just couldn't really do too much. And realistically, Herbert's just looking to prove what he can do in the playoffs at this point. He got ruined because of that game against the Jaguars where they freaking collapsed because of Brandon Staley. But now that they finally have a competent head coach, I would be very terrified to play the Chargers in a playoff game with how Jim Harbaugh plays in the playoffs, and on top of the fact that they are built to win playoff games, and they have a top 5 quarterback in Herbert to really solidify that as well. So him at number 5 makes sense for me. Number 4, Joey Burrow. Absolutely amazing quarterback as well. He can really do a lot. The one thing he lacks is that ability to run the ball. He's a lot worse than Herbert even. And then obviously Jackson and Allen, who we'll get to, they're very good at running the ball as well. So that's one thing he lacks. But at the same time, he's the only one of those 3 quarterbacks, Allen, Burrow, and Jackson, to make it to a Super Bowl, albeit, I guess, in a really interesting situation. But nonetheless, he made it first. He is the only one still to have made one. But I do think that he is a very good quarterback. He's definitely up there. And obviously this year with the lack of weapons, having Higgins out for a couple weeks to start the year, even now he's out. But he's done great things, and I really do like Joe Burrow. Number 3, this is where you're really going to hate me. I have Josh Allen at 3, Lamar Jackson at 2. And before everybody freaks out, I'm a diehard Buffalo Bills fan. And I really do love Josh Allen. He is my favorite quarterback in the league, favorite player in NFL history.
I'm still going to flip you off.
Yes, I see. But here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, yes. I understand Josh Allen's played better in the postseason than Lamar Jackson has. Everybody shoved that down my throat when I say that I have Jackson over Allen. And even as a Bills fan, I get this all the time, especially because I'm a Bills fan. Because they're like, oh, you can go against your own quarterback like that? Like, I get Mahomes because he's the best quarterback maybe ever. But, with Allen versus Jackson, are you kidding me? And I'm sorry. Josh Allen is definitely an amazing quarterback. But the thing is here, it's Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. It's Josh Allen in the playoffs. Neither of them have been to a Super Bowl. Neither of them have won a Super Bowl. They've both been to a conference championship game. Neither of them have made it past that. Neither of them can get past. Neither of them can get past. Neither of them can get past Mahomes and the other AFC teams.
Allen can't get past Mahomes because his defense sells. Lamar Jackson can't get past Mahomes because he sells. If you put Allen on the Ravens and Lamar on the Bills, Allen probably would have beaten Mahomes once or twice in these playoffs. He would have beaten him last year without a doubt. There's maybe even in 2019, he would have been able to make it. Allen on the Ravens would have at least made 1, maybe 2 Super Bowls. Lamar on the Bills wouldn't probably have lost in the wild card round every single year.
No, I agree. I do think so that it can be interesting, but the sad reality that we live in is the fact that Josh Allen's a Bill and Lamar Jackson's a Raven. And for that reason, no hypotheticals aside, based off just what we see, the facts we've had, neither of them have made a Super Bowl. They're both great in the regular season. They're both this, they're both that. Jackson is a little bit worse than Allen, in my opinion, in a lot of facets, especially that arm strength. But I mean, The same thing you were saying about Josh Allen being able to do this with a lack of receivers. Who does Lamar have outside of Zay Flowers, really? Not really much. Rashad Bateman is worse than Khalil
The thing, though,
Shakir, in my opinion.
here's my thing.
Mark
I just
Andrews
want to
hasn't
bring
been
this up.
fully healthy.
You were talking about not having receivers, but the thing is with Derrick Henry and how lethal that run game is, which you can partly give to Lamar, they have 4 players in the top 15 of separation data this year. So they're even they're not their greatest receivers, they're getting open. Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, and Isaiah Likely are all getting wide the fuck open. Josh Allen has no one near that. So Lamar's throwing to wide open players while Josh Allen is not. Okay, continue.
No, I get
just
that.
had to get that off my
But
chest.
no, that's fair. But the thing is here with Josh Allen being at 3, it's basically it's splitting hairs. You know, they're very, very close. They're right there. They're 2 and 3. And yes, the thing is I understand splitting hairs probably doesn't work for you in this scenario because you think that number 2 and number 1, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in your rankings are just that much better than the number 2,
Well, no.
3.
So this is what I have. I have it different. I have 1 Mahomes, 2 Allen, 3 Lamar, 4 Burrow, 5 Herbert. Like I think Allen is close to Lamar and Burrow. I think there's a small gap. I think Lamar and Burrow are interchangeable. And then I think there's a small gap and then Herbert. I think Mahomes is by far and away better than anyone. He's
right. And again, obviously, I think that same thing. I have Mahomes at 1. But the thing is, to finish this point on Lamar Jackson and Allen, neither of them made that Super Bowl yet, sadly for us as Bills fans. But here's the thing. If you want to say that the Bills don't have the offensive weapons, I get that. But at the same time, Lamar doesn't have the O-line that Allen has. Allen has not been sacked like barely at all this year. Lamar, the single reason they lost that Raiders game is because the Raiders got like 6 sacks in that football game. It was an absolute terrible game. You even mentioned it on our podcast that week, saying that you were scared about the Ravens playing the Raiders because Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins against that terrible O-line.
The thing is, though, I get that the Ravens line has been playing better, and part of the thing why Allen doesn't take as many sacks is he is the best quarterback in the league of breaking and avoiding sacks.
Oh, no, yeah,
he'll be like
yes.
the offensive line only be like 10th in pressure rate, and he'll be number 1 in sacks allowed. That is part of it. Also, I would rather have my quarterback get pressured more, but my receivers get wide open if my quarterback is that good and that elusive, because he can get out of that and then throw to the wide open guys. That's me. So that's right. But that's all right.
I really do think these guys are so interchangeable. They're literally 1-2 for me. They're really close. The thing is with Jackson, with Allen, I think if Allen wins the MVP this year, it'll be a lot like Jackson winning it in 2019. You know, where Jackson really went nuts. You know, there wasn't much of a debate for Jackson in 2019, I don't think. However, I do think that it's basically in that same situation because you have Allen and Jackson in those spots. You know, Allen's not really favored to win right now. Jackson was a clear runaway favorite in that situation. I think Allen should be the favorite.
Betting favorites, Allen is ahead of Lamar. Allen's plus 290.
I think he should be.
I do too, because Lamar's playing next to Lamar's playing next to the offensive player of the year. How can he be more valuable than someone who's not playing with anyone near that level? Like just Derrick Henry alone it's not like making Lamar worse. It's making his job easier. It's like the credit for why the offense is so good is less towards Lamar. Allen, it's 90% Allen.
No, exactly.
Well, I think,
that's the thing is if Allen can really make it far in this year's playoffs, whether that be the conference championship, whether that be a Super Bowl, whether that be whatever, I do think Allen wins that number 2 race. But for right now, they're really, really close. They're back and forth for me. And honestly, I thought this was going to be a very vanilla list. It ended up becoming a very vanilla list. I kind of threw it in there just to be a little spicy. It literally gave me Jackson versus Allen 1-on-1. And I was like, you know what? For the chaos, let's click Jackson. But at the same time, there is a clear argument to be made for Jackson. I understand that.
Oh, for sure.
I wouldn't say
I see it.
I wouldn't say super, super clear, but there's an argument to be made for him. And I do think, personally, in my heart, Josh Allen will forever be the best quarterback in the NFL. But based off of
my biased Bills heart, yes. In my biased Bills heart, Josh Allen
I have to go Lamar Jackson at 2. As sad as it is.
Fair. It's fair, I guess. I don't like it, but I get it. All right. Well, that's it for our QB ranking thing that took up a very, very long time. I enjoyed it. We'll continue to do more things like this. We might do some team rankings for different, like we'll do some more
Power
fun things
rankings,
on
maybe.
Tuesdays. Yeah, we'll do some maybe next week we do power rankings or something.
But maybe
We'll
it's not
figure it
all
out.
the teams. Maybe we'll do like top 10 or something, just so it's not this long.
Yeah, well, you're right.
And then
Maybe
we can also
maybe we'll do it.
incorporate some other stuff in there too. Top 10 for power rankings, like other things we could do on top of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Maybe we can do college football, like our top 10. We can do like college football rankings too, who we think should be the 12 and stuff like that. So we'll
Ooh.
get a little more creative with what we do on Tuesdays, but we decided to throw this in for this week instead of just boringly going over every single game. We figured this was a little more fun. The last segment for tonight is we are going to go over the Bills game. We are we are Bills fans. We are located in Western New York. We're going to talk about the Bills. The first thing I want to bring up is there's been a couple of recent moves, not trades, but we caught Mike Edwards and then we signed Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson. Not big moves, but they will affect the team, I guess. What are your quick thoughts on that?
I think it's nice to bring him back, although Shaq Lawson's like, what the hell, man? You got bringing everybody else back but me. But
oh, wait, no, my AirPod might be dead soon, but the one's working, so I'll play it out.
Oh, all right. But anyway,
never mind.
Mike Edwards, he wasn't. Oh, hold on, folks.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, yeah, I can hear you. Okay. All right.
Okay, perfect.
Anyway,
though, I do think that the Mike Edwards deal, obviously, we were trying to explore a trade once it comes out that, like we're gonna cut him afterwards. No one's really gonna go out and trade for him unless you really think there's gonna be a market for him, like between 6 or 7 teams. In that situation, you just trade like a 7th just to make sure you get him instead of someone else. But the Titans end up signing him, which I really like. He reunites back in Tennessee with the Chiefs' old special teams guy for their DB coach, who also came over, which is why L'Jarius Sneed went to Tennessee as well. Also reuniting with former teammate L'Jarius Sneed, obviously, in that situation. So I really like that fit for him. But at the same time, I don't really like I'm happy the Bills get rid of him. I don't think he really was needed in the first place. I kind of questioned the move when we first got him to begin with. Also, I think if you give anybody reps at this point at safety, it's got to be Cole Bishop. But I do think that Mike Edwards is still a solid guy. As for the 2D lineman, Jordan Phillips had 9.5 sacks in the one season he played with the Bills. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense to bring him in. And Quentin Jefferson, while he can't play D tackle, in my opinion, I think he has to be slated outside. I think that could be like a perfect addition for the Dwayne Smoot move. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I kind of stole that from you, but
yeah. Yeah, right. But I do think that Smoot is gone now, so I do think that Quentin Jefferson goes into that role just fine. I think he could probably play out at that defensive end and really be that run-stopping guy we need in a situation if we just keep getting depleted by the injuries. Also, Jordan Phillips is the replacement for Dwayne Carter, who's on injured reserve right now. So really like these moves for us, just a couple depth pieces, bring back familiar faces as well. Familiar to this system, played well in our system, did Jordan Phillips with those 9.5 sacks in that one season he played with us as well. So really like the moves for Buffalo.
Yeah, no, I like them too. They're not big splashy moves, but they're depth pieces, and depth is important, especially come playoff time when there's injuries. You need people to step up, and having people that are used to the system having people used to the system will definitely play a big role. But one thing I want to talk about is the game. Obviously, we beat the Dolphins 30-27. Tyler Bass, 61-yard field goal. In my opinion, he redeemed himself for the season. I mean, what a kick. That was absolutely amazing. I thought he's been playing better these last couple of weeks, and I think that's going to be a big thing mentally for him. I think the city's going to really rally behind him as he's struggled at the beginning of the year. Then the Titans game, like when he showed up, everyone was chanting Tyler Bass, Tyler Bass, Tyler Bass, and he played well. The Seahawks game, he played well. Yeah, he missed the extra point, but he made up for it by getting
hit it off the upright field goal.
Yeah, it was a 61-yard field goal to win the game. I mean, it's franchise record. And he absolutely money would have made it from 65, 67 yards. Great
Well,
job
that's
by him.
because of the wind.
There wasn't that much wind there.
There was wind at his back. There was 6 mile per hour wind at his back. That's enough.
Not to do much, to do a little. Even without the wind, if there was no wind, he still would have made that.
Yes.
Yes. But overall, I really love to see that out of him. Hopefully, it's a good boost to help him throughout the season because we really need him to show up big time. If we want to make a playoff run, we don't want to have last season end up like it did. And then, obviously, Josh Allen with a brilliant game. The defensive line with an awful game, for being honest. They couldn't stop the run. Teron Johnson was the one saving grace on that defense with the peanut punch. What a great play by him. He kind of like stalked Raheem, came out of nowhere. Raheem didn't even see him and popped it out perfectly. Kyrie Elam, I thought, held his own against Tyreek Hill. He got killed in the one double move. He had the one weird play in zone where he was like standing right super tight to the sideline and Tyreek Hill was wide open for a catch. But I feel like in Benford's absence, you're not going to be able to replace him, but he was able to do enough where it wasn't like a detriment to the team. So I liked what I saw out of him. I liked what I saw out of the receivers without Amari Cooper. I thought they played well. Keon, I guess the big drop sucked to see, but the offense, I mean, you score 30 points, you score 30 points. Obviously, a couple of mistakes away from dropping 40 plus on them. So, but overall, what are your thoughts on the game?
I really liked it as well. I mean, there's not much you can say about that offense that wasn't accurate, other than obviously the Coleman drop. Like that's just one you got to be able to make. That's a touchdown if he catches it. By the way, that's also, I think they talked about it on the broadcast, but I'm not sure if everybody knows this. But that was supposed to be a run pass option, so an RPO. Basically, Allen decided that Coleman was open and he threw it and he made a perfect throw and made the correct read, in my opinion, because it would have been 6 points had he caught that pass in stride like he would have. But it right through the hands, hit him in the helmet, picked off by shoulder, but popped up into the air and picked off by Jalen Ramsey. Unfortunate for the Bills, but we redeem ourselves to get back into this game. Speaking of redeeming, Tyler Bass with a missed extra point, one off the upright, really scared me. And then he hits that 61-yard field goal to really win this football game for the Bills, put it on over the top. Great ending for Buffalo. Also, I really like the move by Sean McDermott, finally being aggressive in a situation like that. Because honestly, I understand everyone's like, what do you mean? That's an obvious situation to kick the field goal. Not really. If he misses that field goal, there's probably 5 or 6 seconds left on the clock for them at midfield. They still had 2 timeouts. As well. You have 2 of the fastest receivers in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So you could have made a quick throw over the middle, got 5 yards, and then had a field goal to win the game for you guys as well, albeit against the wind. But at the same time, any chance is better than no chance. Really good job from Coach McDermott to realize that and actually take advantage of it, send Tyler Bass out, have the confidence in him to do that, and get us the win in the end. Obviously, Allen with another masterclass of a game. Cook had a solid game. The D-line really needs to step up. This rushing attack the rushing defense cannot look this bad if we go up against Jonathan Taylor and the Colts next week. That's just not going to bode well for this Buffalo Bills team. And realistically, to win that game, they really have to go out and stop the run early, get them into passing situations, be up by 10 to 14 points, force Joe Flacco to force the ball downfield, which he's known for, and get those interceptions, as I do think that's very important in this situation. But I do really like the game. Obviously, we come away with a hard-fought win against a team in Miami who was fighting for their lives at that point. That was their last real bit of hope at a playoff spot with how the AFC is shaping up. But unfortunately for them, they come up just short. And as for us, as Bills fans, squish the fish, baby, once again at home.
Ooh. Yes. So that is all we have for you guys.
Fuck you, Dolphin!
At the end of the day, go Bills. I guess the one quick thing is I understand yesterday was election night, but that was not the most shocking thing of the night. The Buffalo Sabres won by 4 goals. We'll get more into that on Friday, but to anyone who didn't believe in the Sabres, I also didn't, but they won a game by 4 goals. It's a miracle. Maybe things do work. Maybe life is good. I don't know. Let's go Sabres. Let's go Bills.
Maybe life is bad at the same time because we have the Rangers on Thursday.
So maybe on Friday's episode I won't be as optimistic. Unless we win that, then maybe miracles happen back-to-back times because that would be a miracle to win that game. But I hope you guys all enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, subscribe, share. yeah, have a great day. We will see you guys on Friday.